All right. At this point, our first witness for today's panel will include Ms. Ann Wagner, representing Missouri's 2nd Congressional District, who will give opening remarks regarding her efforts on the issue. Ms. Wagner, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
I thank you, Madam Chairman and Ranking Member Doyle and colleagues, for hosting this committee hearing today and for allowing me to give some opening remarks. I appreciate your commitment to addressing online trafficking, and especially appreciate that so many members of this subcommittee have publicly co-sponsored H.R. 1865, stopping the victimization of America's children and adults online is my top priority in Congress. And I know I have an ally in Chairman Blackburn. I also appreciate subcommittee members Adam Kinzinger and Yvette Clark for being original co-sponsors of my bill. My first major piece of legislation concerning online trafficking was the SAVE Act, which became law in 2015. The SAVE Act was a first step in addressing federal-level prosecutions of websites. Unfortunately, it has not yet been used, presumably because the mens rea standard in the legislation, knowingly, is too high. Moreover, the SAVE Act was federally focused, and it did not enable states and local prosecutors to protect their communities. I have learned a lot since then, and this is why, over a year and a half ago, I began working on H.R. 1865, the Allow States and Victims to Fight Online Sex Trafficking Act, or FOSTA. The bill is written for victims, not only because it would allow victims to pursue civil justice, but because it would empower local prosecutors to take down websites that facilitate trafficking before they ever reach the size or the scope of Backpage.com. The House understands that enabling vigorous criminal enforcement is not just important, but mandatory in any legislation we pass. This is why over 170 of my colleagues co-sponsored FOSTA when I personally explained to them how websites can perpetuate modern-day slavery with impunity. Why are these websites able to sell our children? Because judges have ruled that Section 230 prevents websites that exploit the most vulnerable members of our society from being held accountable. Congress's response to these rulings must be patently clear. Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act was never intended to allow businesses to commit crimes online that they could never commit offline. When Congress passed the Communications Decency Act in 1996, it explicitly acted to prevent the Internet from becoming a red light district, and it clearly did not believe that rape was a prerequisite of a free and open Internet. What Congress cannot do is pass a bill that amends Section 230 but is so narrow that it could only be used to prosecute Backpage.com. Let me be plain. I support the Senate's recent action on my legislative proposal. I appreciate the complicated strategic environment that Senators Blumenthal and Portman and others are operating in, and I believe that it is a step in the right direction. But the Senate bill is not the full solution. Backpage.com is currently, as Mr. Doyle stated, the largest of the websites that facilitate trafficking in America, but it is already under federal investigation. And it is just a small piece of this growing criminal ecosystem. Hundreds, and let me underscore, hundreds of advertising sites have jumped into the marketplace of illegal sex. For instance, Eros serves as the high-end market. Escorts in College advertises women close to and under the age of consent. And Massage Troll is sadly popular in my own district. Thanks to Senator Portman's investigation, a wealth of evidence against Backpage.com has been discovered over the past year. And while it may now be possible, though still incredibly difficult, to prove that Backpage.com knowingly assisted in sex trafficking violations, it is not possible to gather this level of evidence for the hundreds of other websites that are profiting from the sex trade. I have spoken with prosecutors across the country who have asked the House to pass a practical solution that will allow them to take predatory websites off the internet. And I am repeatedly told that any legislation that depends exclusively on the knowingly mens rea standard is merely a Washington, D.C. feel-good exercise. Congress might pat itself on the back, but will have accomplished little to prevent the sale of victims online. FOSTA is centered on the reckless disregard standard that prosecutors need to open cases on bad actor websites, and we must find a way to maintain a useful mens rea standard, or at the very least not raise the very high bar that victims and prosecutors must already meet. If we are serious about helping victims, we must create laws that allow for a robust state and local criminal enforcement. Criminal enforcement means businesses will stay out of illegal sex trade. Fewer people will ever become victims, demand will be reduced, and yes, civil suits will be easier to bring. The criminals who auction our children will be put behind bars. I believe, in closing, we can mark up a bipartisan House bill that will provide meaningful tools to prevent future victimization, and I look forward to working with you to pass a forward-facing solution that will disrupt the online trafficking industry. I thank you, Madam Chairman. I thank you all on the committee and my colleagues for allowing me to give this opening remarks.
Gentlelady yields back.